Picture the height of the Cold War. The stakes are absolutely astronomical. The arms race is terrifying. But behind closed doors, the US government wasn't just building up nuclear stockpiles. No, they were actually trying to weaponize human consciousness itself. We are talking about highly classified, deeply guarded attempts to literally hack the human mind. The goal? To create psychic spies capable of crossing enemy lines without ever leaving a room. It sounds exactly like science fiction, I know, but these are the real, declassified files of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA. Welcome to the Info Pit. Today we're opening the vault on one of the most bizarre and secretive military intelligence programs in American history. $20 million. That is the massive budget poured into this shadowy program over a nearly 20-year timeline. I mean, they were operating out of this old, leaky wooden barracks at Fort Meade, Maryland, and yet the CIA, the DIA, and Army intelligence were heavily funding this highly classified initiative. It went by a bunch of different code names over the years: Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane. But you probably know it by its final and definitely most famous designation, Project Stargate. But before we can talk about the psychic spies themselves, we really have to dig into the wild science they were actually relying on. Section 1. Unlocking the gateway process. Okay, let's dive right into this. To understand how the military thought they could somehow create psychic operatives, we've got to look at the mechanics. How exactly did they plan to unlock these hidden human abilities? Well, look at the files. This is a direct, declassified CIA document outlining something called the Gateway Experience. The government was intensely studying how to physically alter consciousness. And to explain their methods, intelligence analysts actually compared this gateway process to existing techniques, things you've probably heard of, like hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. They wanted to know exactly how the left and right hemispheres of the brain interacted with each other, and, more importantly, how that natural interaction could be completely overwritten. Section 2. Brain Hemisphere Synchronization. This brings us to a slightly dark, highly clinical breakdown of exactly how the military attempted to essentially hack the human brain. They weren't just passively observing consciousness, they were actively trying to force it into a very specific, totally unnatural state. They called this state hemisync, which is short for brain hemisphere synchronization. Basically, it happens when the EEG patterns of both your left and right brain are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. Now here's the catch. This synchronized brainwave state is incredibly rare in normal everyday consciousness. It's almost impossible to achieve on your own. But the government researchers, they didn't think they had to wait for it to happen naturally. They firmly believed they could force the brain into hemisync using specialized audio techniques. And that leads us directly into this declassified document detailing the frequency following response, or FFR. The technique here is just as fascinating as it is unsettling. You see, the human ear can't consciously hear the specific low frequencies that are associated with deep, altered states of sleep and consciousness. So the researchers used a biological loophole. They would play one audible frequency in the left ear and a slightly different audible frequency in the right ear. Your brain, trying to make sense of these conflicting signals, literally chooses to hear the difference between the two. It creates this third, phantom beat frequency entirely inside the mind. By doing this, they found they could artificially drag a subject's brainwaves into the exact frequencies they wanted. But getting the brainwaves right was really only step one. They were also studying this truly bizarre biomedical concept called the resonance model. They found that by inducing a profound sleep-like state of relaxation, they could actually fade out something called the bifurcation echo. That's the slight rebound of blood pulsing through your aorta. Once that echo faded, the human heartbeat would create a regular, rhythmic sine wave of about 7 hertz. This sound resonates throughout your entire body, traveling all the way up into the fluid-filled cavities of your skull, causing the brain itself to physically move up and down by up to 0.01 millimeters. At this point, the entire human body effectively becomes a tuned vibrational system. And here's where it gets truly wild. Because the human body is now vibrating at roughly 7 to 7.5 hertz, it perfectly matches the resonance of the Earth's own ionospheric cavity. The CIA files explicitly claim this harmony creates a phenomenon known as energy entrainment. Basically, the body's energy field locks into the Earth's electrostatic field. According to the scientists who wrote these files, this creates the perfect medium for a telepathic carrier wave, a signal that can theoretically travel around the entire planet, passing effortlessly through metal, concrete, and water in just 1/7 of a second. Section 3. Project Stargate Remote Viewos. Now, the government obviously didn't spend $20 million just to write up some theoretical papers. They actually put this into practice. The primary active objective of Project Stargate was something called remote viewing. This is defined as the purported ability to psychically see events, sites, or information from a great distance. The DIA and CIA pulled together a small, highly secretive unit of about 15 to 20 individuals to serve as actual psychic spies. One of the most famous guys in the program was Joseph McMoneagle, a master remote viewer who ended up participating in thousands of trials for active intelligence operations. And to be clear, they weren't gazing into crystal balls here. They were using strict, heavily monitored scientific protocols designed to pull data right out of thin air. And they certainly weren't testing these spies on simple parlor tricks either. Project Stargate was called in for incredibly sensitive, high-stakes operational targets. We are talking about critical situations where all conventional intelligence, satellites, spies on the ground, financial tracking, had completely failed. The military actively tasked these remote viewers with locating missing hostages, finding elusive Scud missiles during the Gulf War, identifying the exact coordinates of hidden Soviet nuclear submarines, and even searching for hidden plutonium in North Korea. Whenever the Pentagon hit an absolute dead end, they called the psychics.
Section 4, the $20 million question.
So that brings us to the very core of this whole enigma. Did any of this actually work? Well, we quickly run into a massive clash of information between government reviews and independent experts. This is what we call the conspiracy gap. On one side, we have Professor Jessica Utz from UC Davis. She's a statistics expert who thoroughly reviewed the program's data. Her conclusion? Using standard scientific metrics, the case for psychic functioning was literally scientifically proven, producing accurate hits consistently above random chance. But on the exact opposite side, we have the official 1995 report commissioned by the CIA and conducted by the American Institutes for Research, or AIR. Their conclusion was brutal. They stated flat out that remote viewing never provided an adequate basis for actionable intelligence. But here is exactly where the plot thickens. Even that highly skeptical CIA-commissioned AIR report made a genuinely startling admission in their own executive summary. They wrote, "A statistically significant laboratory effort has been demonstrated in the sense that hits occur more often than chance." Think about that. The crucial point here is that even the skeptical review that ultimately killed the program admitted that in a controlled laboratory setting, something entirely inexplicable was happening. The numbers flat out defied random probability. However, skeptics like psychologists Ray Hyman and David Marks stepped in and identified what they considered to be fatal scientific flaws in how the Stargate experiments were actually run. First off, they noted a complete lack of independent replication. They also pointed out a very high possibility of sensory leakage, meaning the subjects might have been unconsciously picking up on subtle clues in the room. But most damningly, they found that the principal investigator running the project was frequently also the judge scoring the accuracy of the remote viewings. That is a massive conflict of interest in any scientific study. Plus, much of the actual intelligence gathered in the field was incredibly vague or included completely erroneous data. So based on these severe methodological flaws, the CIA formally terminated Project Stargate in 1995.
Section 5, the universal hologram.
But our investigation definitely doesn't end with the program's closure, because buried deep within the declassified theoretical documents of the gateway process is a final, lingering mystery, a concept so massive it essentially redefines reality itself. The intelligence files detail this mind-bending theory that the universe is actually a gigantic hologram composed entirely of interacting energy fields. In this model, the human mind is also a hologram. The theory suggests that through techniques like hemisync, human consciousness can actively attune itself to this universal hologram. The right brain perceives the holographic input from the universe, and the left brain processes it, theoretically allowing a person to deduce information, see targets, and achieve a state of consciousness completely independent of time and space.
Which leaves us with this final, highly provocative thought. If Project Stargate was really nothing more than flawed methodology and subjective delusion, if it was truly a total, complete failure from day one, like they claim, why did the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth spend 20 long years and $20 million trying to map a holographic reality? Were they just chasing shadows, or did they brush up against something they simply couldn't control?
The files are officially declassified, but the whole truth definitely remains in the dark. If you want to keep digging into the secrets they left behind, hit that subscribe button. Join us here at the Info Pit for more deep dives and declassified explainer investigations. Until next time, keep questioning the official story.